Good evening and welcome to Sistabiz with your hosts, Nicole and Tamara, where we educate our community one show at a time. We are brought to you by BlackUSA.News, home of I Am Black Wall Street by Donnie Glover. If you are looking for a last minute gift, you can grab a copy on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Again, thank you for tuning in to BlackUSA.News. Be sure to tune in to our programming throughout the week, Monday through Sunday. From the East Coast to the West Coast, we bring Black news to the forefront. Stay connected and please subscribe. So, Nicole, good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I'm fine. And you?
Wonderful, wonderful.
Good.
Thank you. You all make sure you check out my talented partner, Nicole and Michael Haney, this Sunday for a special 90 minutes in Black USA live at 6 p.m. on Sunday. So, without further ado, Nicole, are you going to talk about our wonderful guest, Mayor Tim Adams?
Yeah, I got a chance to take a look at his bio. I was, I guess, astonished to see that he's a local graduate of Bowie State, HBCU, new mayor, and he's like the first Black mayor of Bowie. Phenomenal to do that, and he's ran one of the most powerful businesses in Black America. I think that's great too. So wonderful.
He's also, so the name of his business is we'll have him introduce all of that. So again, without further ado, we are going to bring on Mayor Tim Adams, who is a candidate for the Comptroller of the State of Maryland. Welcome, Mayor Adams.
Hey, good evening, ladies. How are you today?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. So, so we did that brief bio of you. It would have taken us a really long time to read it. Why don't you tell us about your business? Like, what made you decide to? You're known right now as the mayor of Bowie, but what made you decide to start your business that you started? Tell us about that.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and I'll try and make it real brief. I started off at Xavier University. I'm a proud graduate of an HBCU. I did a co-op as a chemist with U.S. Customs, and I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a lab. So I went to and received my MBA. With my MBA, I headed out to the West Coast, and I got recruited into the defense industry. African-American female by the name of Anise Eisler, and I always want to say her name, recruited me. I went to work for a contractor, but she took me under her wing and taught me weapon systems and support equipment. And a part of that, because as you can imagine, there weren't very many who look like us in general, but especially having an African-American female in that role. And she took me and she taught me day in and day out about weapon systems and support equipment. And from that, I was too young and naive to know that I wasn't supposed to start my own company. And so from the trunk of my car, I started Systems Application and Technologies, which is SATECH. And from that 32 years ago, it's now one of the largest Black-owned businesses in the nation. Every day, hundreds and hundreds of men and women get up and put on a SATECH badge and go out and do national defense and national security. You know, we support the warfighter. Probably over 95% of what we do is what you ladies coming from the military background understand when I say in secured environments. And that's who we are. And from there, I've just been able to grow and prosper, and I've been very blessed in doing that.
That's wonderful.
Wow. So what made you want to make the transition from business to now, like kind of like the local government, state government? It's kind of
well,
jump.
I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I think, you know, I've always prided myself on what I was taught by my parents, and that is that you always give back to community. As I mentioned, my quest to even start my business was based upon people like Anise Eisler, who helped me along the way. I've had several mentors along the way. I've always tried to give back to the community. And as an organization, we always talk about being a good corporate citizen. This isn't new to me. I mean, I've been engaged in politics from a standpoint of being able to have that voice, who felt I could always speak truth to power. And I say that so people don't misunderstand. I mean, I've been a Democratic Party trustee for many years. I've gone to the convention and represented the party. I've been named the Democratic Party for the state of Maryland, given the Leadership Award. So I've been engaged from that standpoint. And people know me for always wanting to help in the community. And that's how I ended up making a transition. And true story, my son called me one evening and said, "Dad, you've got to get home real quick." And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Dad, there's a lot of people here and they need to see you." And so I rushed home. I walked into my home, in my living room, and there was a great cross section of people from the City of Bowie. And they were there and they had a spokesman and they asked me to run for mayor. And they said that was based upon, they knew that I had the integrity, that I was always one who spoke the truth to power, and that they could trust me to do the right thing for the city. And so I thought about it, talked to my family, and I agreed to do it. And so that's how I got into running as mayor for the City of Bowie. But I see that just as an extension of all the public service things I've tried to do. Many of which, we all do it. I use the expression my mom had, and that is, if you did something for somebody expecting to thank you, you did it for the wrong reason. So there's a lot of things people, and now that I'm in this campaign, come up and say, "I didn't know you did that. I didn't know you were doing that." But the idea was you just do it because it was the right thing to do, not to call attention upon yourself to do it. And so that's how I got into the public service. I use the expression we've all heard before, that I want my public service towel to be very long and very worn. And so that's what I try to do. I try to give back. So many people have done so much for people like us in general. We talk about those giants who have come before us. Well, I just want to make sure that, I straighten my back, and the people coming behind us, the businesses and the young people, can stand on my shoulders as well and move forward. And that's what motivated me to do this. And some other personal things that happened really motivated me as well. And so that's why I'm doing this. It's a chance to contribute, to make sure we can make life better for those coming behind us. And that one last piece on that is because we're losing ground. And we've got to, my generation in particular, I don't think we fought a good enough fight for those coming behind us. And that's including people like yourselves. And I think some of us have just got to stop, hit pause, and fight that fight. And I've been doing that all along, but I think I need to dedicate myself to that now.
Now, I hate to, I'm just going to push it along in regards to, I wanted to cover this at the end, but I just want to ask you now, since you were talking about the community service, so I'm just going to ask you now. I was looking at the website, the current for the comptroller, and he was basically stating that one of his greatest accomplishments is, I guess, like bridging this gap with the MBEs. So if you were to become comptroller, what would you do differently for, of course, our minority participation, goals in the state? Because there's a lot of issues, but again, they're priding themselves as being successful today.
I think, and not taking away from anybody else and not trying to criticize, but I know for myself what that fight looks like. I fight every day. I have to say, I think it's real aspirational for people who say that, they talk to us and they understand what it is, the fight that we as minorities have. They talk about, they've read about the fights that we have and those kind of things. But the thing about me that makes it different from me is that I don't just talk about it. I don't just read about it. I live it every day. I fought those fights. I understand the challenges that we have.
Mayor Adams, you have a 500 plus employee company. Not many Black owned businesses get to that level. they're lucky if they have more than 5 to 10 people. And that's pretty much the average. Very small businesses. You are a very large business. Does an MBE program, I think the premise of them is to build a program for people to graduate and get to that size or anything close to it. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
What can be done to ensure that programs like that are really working to progress minority businesses?
And I think that goes back to even the initial question. And what is it? Let's be candid. We have MBE goals for the state. I want to say it's 29%, some say 27%, but anyway. But look at, we only probably achieve maybe 12 to 13% of that in a year. But look at New York. Did you see the article about New York topping over 30% of all their contracts going to MBEs? That's the goal we need to have. I think a part of the problem is that we have to have people who understand and know how to advocate for us, our MBE programs. My view is, one of the things the Comptroller does, and I'll kind of just jump there real quick, because I think that'll help us understand that, is the Board of Public Works. And for those who don't know, the Board of Public Works consists of the governor, the treasurer, and the comptroller. Now, we know the governor selects the heads of the agencies and all. That's his responsibility there. We know the treasurer is selected by the legislature, and that's who he's responsible and accountable to. The thing about the comptroller is he should be that voice for the people of just making sure that what we do is the right thing. Because remember, all of the large contracts that come through the state, all the bond bills and so many other things are voted on by the Board of Public Works. And somebody has to be there to really be able to have the willingness to say no. And what I mean by that, we have way too many sole source contracts that come through. I was talking with someone who was talking about how unfair they thought it was just last night that one company has been getting sole source contracts, and they've been doing this business for almost 66 years with no real.
Well, I guarantee they've grown, haven't they? That business
exactly.
Right.
And so it's those kind of, we got retroactive contracts that come across where the agencies award the contract before they ever even get before the Board of Public Works. And you got to understand, on many of these, they get waivers from the MBE program. And they look and they say they can't find us. And the reality is that we need somebody at the table who can make sure, number one, understands the process of contracting and make sure that the agencies, and can lobby the agencies and make sure they understand where to find us. Because many of us have, go ahead. No, please.
No, I don't want to interrupt. But the real issue with the state legislation that backs the MBE program, and if you can talk about how there will be change to that, is it says best faith, good faith effort. A good faith effort is there's been contracts awarded. Let's talk about the Druid Hill Park in Baltimore City, the Oscar Renda and companies like that have just made a good faith effort where they may not be using your MBEs and WBEs. So there's really no teeth in the state of Maryland program. What's the penalty? What's the penalty?
And that's the key. And that's one of the things I want to be able to do and will do as comptroller. We've got to have someone who's doing a review of that. When we look at that data, when we look at that, but in real time are willing to talk about it. In real time are willing to call people out on it. And we're just not doing that. Now, part of that goes back to my being able to say that, I use the Shirley Chisholm quote often, and it's so true. I'm unbought and I'm unbossed. See, that's what scares a lot of people about my candidacy, about me all along, is because I just want to be fair. I just want everybody to have an opportunity. And so I'm not dependent on state contracts or any of that. I work on that federal side. And so I'm able to talk that truth to power, and I'm able to understand the challenges we face. See, I'm one of those people who have had someone call up and say, hey, I doubt if you can do this, but I'm going after this contract and I want to know if you can do this. And you say, yeah, sure. And then you never hear from them again. And then you hear that they've been awarded a contract, and in there they say they gave a good faith effort and couldn't find any of us. And that's just not real. And the thing is, we need to have someone like myself who advocates to make sure that people understand that we're here and that we're not going to let those waivers just go by. I use somebody as a good example, and Maynard Jackson from Atlanta. And I use that only because, a lot of things changed in Atlanta when they were going to build that airport. And Maynard Jackson said, you will have a robust minority program. And they balked and they said, no. And he said, no, you will have it. They said, well, if we have to do that, we won't build it. And they said they wouldn't build it. But Maynard Jackson said, well, okay, you just won't build it. And then they came back and said, well, okay, maybe we do need to do this. We need people like myself who's done that grind every day, who has seen all these games played and understand how important it is for us to be at the table. We can't keep having people say, well, we couldn't find anybody or they don't have the capacity. Well, if we don't invest in our MBE programs and provide those opportunities, we never will get those. I'll talk about the 8A program if you don't mind. If I'm going on a little bit, just let me know.
No, I'm loving it. I'm into
I got to give a little history lesson real quick.
Okay.
If you don't mind. See, people don't understand when Perrin Mitchell, that giant from here in Maryland, when they were putting together the Small Business Act, and particularly the 8A portion, they were doing that to build sustainable Black businesses. And the reason for that was so that we could grow, we could build capacity, but also so that people who looked like us would have a place where they could go and they were judged on their merits and not on the color of their skin or anything else. And we've kind of lost our focus on that. A lot of times people don't look at it as sustainable. People ask me often, why haven't you sold that company? Why haven't you done that? Well, because that's not why I got into it. I started off as a small business. I went through the 8A program. I wouldn't be here today as SATECH, at the company that I am, the size that I am, if I had not gone through the 8A program. Now, some people say, oh, you shouldn't say that, because you could have been successful. No. The 8A program and the MBE programs helped me to accomplish all of those things. A lot of people don't realize with the 8A program when it was set up, cost was not to be a factor in awarding the contracts. Because they understood as you're trying to build your infrastructure as small businesses, that you can't be cost competitive to some of the large corporations. That it was supposed to be an opportunity for us to become prime contractors, not relegated to subcontracting. Until you're that prime contractor and have that interface with the customer and learn all the things you need to from a business perspective to lead and to do that, that's what it's all about. And so the MBE program, if we continue to have sole sources in some area, and it's because they say they can't find us, I want to know, what have you done to help develop businesses in that area?
But you spoke briefly about the role of the comptroller. How is the comptroller going to control those agency heads? I mean, it's going to be on the governor and his administration, whomever the governor will be, to do that. How much will you be able to influence the program, the legislation behind the program, even the contracts that are written as part of that legislation that go into it for those primes? And the primes are of the attitude that they don't have to comply. They just have to say they made a good faith effort. How do you lead through that system?
And that's a great question, because there's a couple of things that opens up Pandora's box with that we need to look at. Number one, we need to make sure that we are providing and giving good oversight to the agencies. We shouldn't be hearing about and understanding contracts until they're sitting in front of the Board of Public Works. You know, when you're drafting that, when they're doing that, there should be open periods of where people are able to comment, just like on the federal side, on a procurement, to send in questions, to be a part of that process in doing that. And we need to make sure that we advocate for that. The second thing is that if someone comes before the Board of Public Works with contracts that don't have MBEs, and we look and we say they were out there, then we need to be able to say no. I will vote no. I don't have a fear. You know, I'm not trying to get another office.
So you're not going to worry about those campaign contributions or padding those pockets of your friends? I mean, are you going to be that different? That is like, who does that?
Yeah, one of the things that makes me different, and again, I don't want to go too far on a tangent here, but one of the things that makes me very different, I think, a candidate is, number one, we've never had an independent African American or person of color elected to statewide office in the history of the state of Maryland. I don't believe I'm the first one who's qualified to do that, but I do know that I'm probably one of the few who have been blessed and fortunate enough to say that I don't have to go hat in hand, and I don't have to change my moral core or fiber or beliefs to be able to fund a campaign. I'm not dependent upon that. I've been blessed to be able to go out there and, again, speak truth to power and to actually fight for all of those who can't write those big checks. You know, it's about supporting our businesses, and that's where it becomes key, because the only way we'll get to that place is if we create generational wealth so that those coming behind us are in that place. We create that generational wealth, then we start building the capacity. Then we start being able to contribute jobs and that economic growth in our own communities, and not having to go hat in hand to someone else to do that.
Well,
I mean,
Nicole,
that's a hard way to put it, but it's real.
He's been eavesdropping on our phone conversations, Nicole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. I mean, generation wealth is something that we talk about all the time. You know, one of my main concerns is the gap in home ownership. Forbes magazine back in June released that pretty much the Black race is decreasing in home ownership, and I think that that's alarming to the point that they have new measures that have come into place. But what specifically, I guess, can the state of Maryland do to emphasize more home ownership?
Yeah, I think, and some of these things don't fall under the purview of the comptroller. But let's just talk as a business person, as an advocate. One of the things we need to understand is, now this is about terminology, but I don't want us to just talk about, quote, affordable housing. We have to talk about workforce housing. And the difference to that is, just like we put in the City of Bowie, where I'm there, we talk about workforce housing. And we talk about people who are working, but making sure that there's housing that's affordable to them. You know, that our teachers and firefighters and those folks who are working at the hotels and at the restaurants, and all of those people who are working 40 hours a week have workforce housing where they can live and afford. You know, and what comes from that is, you know, a lot of times historically what happens is you buy the first house, you increase that equity, and then you buy the next house without a lot of times having to exchange more money, but just taking the equity out of the home and moving up. So I think we need to talk about that. And the second thing is, we can't afford developers and builders to put all of our affordable housing and our workforce housing in one section. You have a lot of developments that go up, and they'll have this, and they say, okay, we're going to do 10% affordable and workforce housing, but then they set aside one special little section for that. What we need to do is make sure that that's scattered amongst all of it. That we have that workforce and affordable housing mixed in with all the other housing. That you don't just create this area that may be subpar to other areas. And I think that's important too. So that's one of those things. But advocating for that home ownership and being able to create that wealth for people to do that is important. And that's something that can be advocated for, and can be fought for. And that's one of the things that I'm proud that we're doing, for example, in the City of Bowie. People say, well, what have you done there? What's going on? I mean, I like.
Yes, that was a question. Sorry to interrupt. That was one of my questions, and it was one of our viewers' questions that we're going to get to later. But yes, what have you done in Bowie?
Well, I'll slow down and
No, please don't.
I'll keep rolling.
An example of that is our Black Lives Matter we passed, right? One of the things that we put in there is that every city policy would be reviewed independently by an outside source for equity and inclusion. That's huge. That's big.
So can you explain that? Because I hear equity and inclusion a lot in the city I live in. I don't see any. So can you explain that to me? Because
yes, and that's making sure that there's no bias in there, that everyone has a fair chance and everyone is treated equally. And that's the key to that. And so you have people who are specialized in looking at it and making sure it does it. But what it also does is it answers that question that so many people ask. As the demographics are changing, some of those who have been in the majority are saying, what about us? But my point to them is if we're reviewing everything for fairness, you don't have anything to worry about. Because now you're covered too. You're covered to make sure that because let's be candid, there's always been that question nobody talks about, or that statement of, oh, are they going to do to us what we did to them? And when you talk about, being fair and equitable to everyone, then that covers everyone.
But how do you quantify that? I mean, we can say it and it sounds good, and it's the buzz term now, equity, equality. How do you quantify that? How do you measure that?
Well, for me, when I talk about equity and inclusion, I'm talking about making sure, for example, on contracts, that it's a level playing field. That you make sure that I have as much information and insight on a contract as everyone else. That I am making sure that people are holding up. There's a reason why we have MBE goals and other things, because we know that's going to grow our economy. That's going to grow businesses that have historically been left out. And so, that expression means a lot when we say people aren't looking for a handout. They're looking for a hand up. They're looking to be treated equally. I still fight that. One of the reasons why I say I'm unusual is that I've been doing that all along. I know what it is. I've worked with other small businesses and helped them to grow national footprints. I talk to people about understanding how to put joint ventures together and create opportunities, and build capacity amongst us and be able to really, there's not a whole lot of that that's in books for us.
I'm looking because I think you got my notebook. You have my note. You have my notebook. I've been taking notes on this, and you stole it because you're saying everything that's come out of my mouth for years.
Yeah, and so that's the key to it. I laugh because we say, okay, how do we do that? One of the things we all know is that we have to stop the bundling of contracts. We've got to make sure that contracts become smaller so that people can compete and not have to listen to that narrative about we don't have the capacity. See, historically, and I'm aging myself here. I'm telling my age a little bit. Historically, I can remember when I first came into it, the buzzwords was, well, we don't know if they have the capability, if they're capable of doing it, if they have
Oh, it's still the buzzword now.
knowledge.
It's still the
And,
buzzword now.
and so, but now a lot of times they look at us and they go, whoa, they have the past performance, they've done this. Well, let's bundle this, because then it becomes, they don't have the capacity. I use a contract that was awarded here not that long ago. And again, it's good to have fought the fight, to be able to understand it. I went and they said, okay, this is the requirements to bid on this. And you've got to have completed contracts of this size and this side and this side. And I said, okay. And I said, oh, we did that. We've done those. And we put in the bid and we put in what we did. And they came back and the response to me was, oh, I'm sorry, you don't fit as the size, the small business we were looking for. And I say, wait, how can you require me to have past experience with contracts that require $25 million or more to have completed, to put that in? And then when I say I had them, then say, oh, those are too large, that you don't qualify as the small business we're looking for.
So the Comptroller of Maryland,
games that people play. And those are the games we got to call them out. I've been very fortunate and blessed as a business, because a lot of those things, I can go to court. And sometimes people say, well, but Tim, why are you doing that? Why are you spending your money? I say, because people did it for me. It doesn't necessarily impact me, but it's about those businesses coming behind me. It's about those who fought for me, those giants who came before me. A lot of people won't know all of their names, and people won't know it was me, but they'll have references they can make of cases that were won on protests that were filed against discriminatory actions. And they'll never know it was me, and that's okay. And I apologize if I'm talking too much, but I just think it's important, and I'm passionate about that. Please go right ahead.
Absolutely. So I did have another question, as far as like, I kind of tapered off to where I was going, but so the comptroller is going to audit at that level, at the requirements level? Is that what you're suggesting, that you as comptroller, Tim Adams, the comptroller of the state of Maryland, will audit agencies, how they're writing requirements, how they're breaking down contracts before? Because usually once it gets to the board, it's typically too late.
Yes, and the point is, it's about advocating before it gets there.
Okay.
And helping businesses to advocate to the agencies before it gets there. There's some really unique things that I would love to see the legislature and others change, and the Board of Public Works together work at, that are just unfair. And what I mean by that is, we've done defense contracts, and you know that if you disagree with something, you can protest and somebody looks at it. What people don't understand is that when the Board of Public Works awards a contract, there is no protest mechanism in place. Once they do that, you have no recourse. And that's wrong.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of contracts get awarded. And people say, how did that happen? This, that. There is no recourse. There is no legal recourse that can be taken that's already structured in there. And I think we need to do that. And I think that'll give an opportunity, particularly for folks who look like us, to challenge that and to make sure we have those opportunities.
Exactly.
Okay, so go ahead. Well, you're really passionate. Yeah. Oh, you're really passionate about this. So you've been the mayor for Bowie for about 2 years?
Yes.
How are your MBEs performing in the city of Bowie?
I couldn't hear you.
How are your MBEs performing in the city of Bowie?
Pretty good. And the interesting part is that we don't have, and I'm working on that now too, to put in an MBE program. Mm-hmm. The city of Bowie actually doesn't even have a true contracts person. I requested that, and we put it in the budget. We're hiring a contracts person. Right now, it's just people within the agencies who get together and decide. And by no means, and I want to make this clear, I'm not questioning anybody's integrity in this. I'm not. But it's not the right process. I had to call a special session last night to clarify what we were doing on a contract for workforce development for people that I know from experience how it goes, and it's for enterprise contract, I buying seat licenses so that people can go and train and do all of those things. But we had to make sure everybody understood exactly what that meant and how it worked. So there are those things that we still have to do. But going back to the comptroller, understand too that, remember, that's that vote that is usually the swing vote on contracts that come before the Board of Public Works. You've got the legislature and the treasurer who has one particular idea. You have the governor and his agencies he's performed with another idea. And the Board of Public Works, for it passed, it takes 2 votes. And typically the comptroller is the one who's that swing vote and seeing and looking at what really works for the people. And so that's why I want to be there.
Wow. Well, I'm definitely impressed. And now I'm going to swing it again. And let's just talk about Baltimore. I know that one of the initiatives that you put on your platform is that teachers and the educational system. So what do you think that you would be able to effectively change in the city of Baltimore? It's the #1 most populated town in the state of Maryland. So it's just like highly imperative. It's at the top of the news.
Sorry.
You gotta take it.
No. I apologize for it ringing.
So what changes do you think? Because I see that education is at the forefront of your campaign. So I'm just wondering, what changes do you think, if any, that you could make within the city of Baltimore?
Well, first and foremost, I think with the Board of Public Works, I think understand the bond bills are voted on by the Board of Public Works. So when we're talking about bills for schools and all of those things, we need to make sure that the money is there and that it goes to the right zip codes. We shouldn't be, your zip code shouldn't determine how many resources are going there. Now, I take a different approach, and I'm going to be very candid. I know that the monitoring of the schools and all that was taken from the comptroller. There were several things that were done to the comptroller, and it was more about political payback that I really don't understand why the legislature and others did it, and government, but that's what they chose to do. But we need to make sure that we're putting that money back into the places that it's needed in the city. I mean, let's be candid. There is no reason for us to keep going in when it comes to Baltimore, for example, going year in, year out, talking about there's no heaters in the winter and there's no air conditioning in the summer, that the water fountains aren't working, that there's mold growing here. To say that we're the wealthiest state in the nation, and yet we have our children and our teachers in crumbling facilities that don't have the best internet or connectivity or resources, is not acceptable. And we need to do greater transparency on how those decisions are being made. But right now, we're not seeing those decisions and what's going on up front. And the comptroller's office can help in being that advocate and doing that, and also making sure when those bond bills come that they're directed in the right areas. And that is something that can be done. Go ahead.
So you're talking about the decision of money going to like a city like Baltimore and the education. But before that, would you want to audit? Because, I know we need more things here, but I'm also very open and very outspoken about funneling money into our city and it disappearing. I know we have some money here. Where it goes, nobody knows. You can look at a budget all day. You can, but I want to know, like, if you're getting state dollars as a city like Baltimore, why are we performing so poorly? And when is the state going to hold the city and not say, we want a report from you, but say, we're going to send independent auditors in to see what the heck is going on before we throw more money for people to drive around in fancier cars and bigger coats?
Yeah.
What can be done from the
She
comptroller?
doesn't like fur.
Because the option, I'm sorry to say that just the solution is not always money. It's sometimes it's accountability.
And that's something that if you ever hear me talk, that's one of the things I talk about with leadership. I said that the two major things with leadership is responsibility and accountability. And you can sometimes pass on responsibility to someone else, but you can never pass on accountability. So our leaders are held to a standard where we need to be accountable for that. Now, having said that, when we talk about what's going on in the schools and what we're trying to do and all of that, we currently have a $2.5 billion surplus in our budget. And it's forecast that we may have a budget surplus, I think, out to 2027 or something like that. Well, we need to, number one, start looking at the compensation that goes to our teachers and to our educators. And for those who don't understand the difference between that, when we talk about educators, we're talking about more than just our teachers. We're talking about all those people, from bus drivers to those on the janitorial staff and to those who are preparing the meals for our kids and all of that. They're all a part of that education process. And a lot of times they're a real close link with the kids. And so we need to take care of our educators. And so that's a part of one of the things we could do. We need to then start looking at, and I said about zip codes, looking at where the money needs to go and hold them accountable. One of the things that we need to do is get back to where there's that transparency of what's going in those schools, where that money is going.
So you're going to do audits.
Yeah, because it's got to stop being who's got the best lobbyist or who's got the best lawyer as to where our kids go. The money goes to educate them. And one of the things that I will do as the comptroller, kind of a little different, but it answers it for you. I will do a top to bottom review of all the agencies. And the reason for that, and that's something that the comptroller can do. And the reason for that is to just make sure, we have a lot of times where we give people tax breaks, tax credits, and all. Well, we need to go back and make sure that what they said they were getting that tax credit for, that they've actually done it. They talk about, we're going to create jobs in this community. We're going to do that in this community. Well, we need to go back and audit them. And I know the legislature is working on some of that. And then we get what we call the clawbacks. We need to take that money back. If you're not doing what you say, if you're not enhancing those communities and using that money for those communities, then we need to take that money back. We need to do those clawbacks. And I will initiate a top to bottom review of all the agencies when I become comptroller.
Ooh, I'm loving it.
Okay, so we want to get to some questions that came in advance. There were so many. I'm going to send some to the rest of them to your team. But we do have some questions. And what I intentionally did was reached out to some more conservative Republicans because I do feel like their some views need to be heard as well. So I'm disclosing that. And one of the questions that came in from Shelley E. was why are taxes so high in Maryland, higher than most surrounding areas, have either lower or no taxes? Why are the taxes so high in Maryland, and what would you do about that?
Well, number one is I think we need to understand that when we have needs and I'm speaking about the legislature sets the tax parameters. Let's make sure everybody understands that. That's not the comptroller. But my view on it is, we have to make sure that we understand how we're going to pay for things we want. And we can't just pass it on taxes. When we want to do something, we can't just say, okay, let's raise taxes to do it. We need to figure out the funding source. And one of the major issues I have is that we're not making sure everybody is paying their fair share. Our taxes is higher because everybody isn't paying their fair share. And so it's pushed down on a lot of the working class and on the small businesses, minority businesses and all. And we're making up that differential, because that's the other thing I want to do. I want to do a real review. I don't think we've done it in 10, 15 years of the tax gap. What is it we should be receiving versus what we're collecting? And we need to do that. But going back to that question, I think we need to make sure that, we're holding people accountable. A lot of people don't realize, and the point, and I won't belabor this, but probably of the 150 largest corporations in Maryland, probably a third of them pay zero taxes. That's where the tax rate gets pushed down to other people. That causes us to have a higher tax rate. The other thing I see, and it's just purely from a economic standpoint, is that we've got to get more small businesses engaged. We got to create more businesses. We got to create more opportunities, because when you do that, then you're talking about greater revenue. You're giving greater tax revenues, and you're talking about people having a better quality of life, which then it just goes on, because those small businesses need vendors to help support them, and then you grow and you grow and you grow. And that's the other part about why you need to get rid of all these sole source contracts and make sure we start having more competition.
Well, talking about taxes, we must talk about marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
We know. We know. I've looked at your website, and I know that is one of the things that you are pushing for. The last rounds, hardly any minorities was awarded any licenses.
Yes.
It was very sad, to say the least. What do you think, future-wise, it may hold, or any outlooks?
Yeah, I think number one, I was the first candidate to come out and say, I believe in legalizing recreational marijuana. But I think it's important that I say why, and because it's important. I think number one, we need to regulate it. And when we talk about regulation, we're talking about, a lot of times now, people don't know what they're really putting in their bodies. We don't know what kind of chemicals may have been used on all those kind of things. So we need to regulate that. We need to make sure that we tax it, because you talk about how do we lower our tax rates and doing all. Imagine now having a funding source that is significant, that we can use for Kerwin, for education, that we can use for building our schools, for all those things we need. That's a huge tax base that we can use, and we need to educate. We use some of that money for education, and it's important we understand that, because now with marijuana, with cannabis, there's all these edibles and all of these things. We need to make sure we're letting people know how to make sure that our children are safe. People think it's funny when they see, oh, my dog got into the trash and look what happened to them after they ate that. That's not funny, because that could be a child. And we got to understand it. And so we've got to educate and make sure on that. So the other part of that is, I think we cannot roll out contracts and opportunities with cannabis that doesn't specifically include opportunities for minorities to participate. Now, one of the things they had in the original RFP was that would be a part of the evaluation criteria. It got taken out, it got moved. No, we need to have that. Understand that we're missing out on that generational wealth when we do that. And let's talk about the other factor, of how many of our young people and older are caught up in the system because of marijuana. Well, we need some of those dollars to make sure that we take care of them as well, coming out and create opportunities. So I believe that on the front end, in describing and doing what we did with those licenses, we don't need to wait and award all the licenses to those who don't look like us, give them an unfair advantage, and then come back with another round later and say, oh, okay, we'll include people called. No, that needs to be up front. That needs to be a major part of it.
Okay.
You know, and that goes about the Board of Public Works, awarding those contracts, making sure that people have those licenses. And I feel very strongly about that. You know, we've looked at so many issues. For example, you know, here's a group that competed in Pennsylvania and finished number one there, but didn't make the cut here in Maryland. And nobody could explain what the difference was. There are things we just got to hold people accountable. And you talked about that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's somewhere, well, on the Board of Public Works, and when you have a comptroller like myself who have seen all the things, fought all those fights continually, and you'll have a better voice. And we'll be able to talk to the legislature and get them to understand what needs to be done and how these things need to be laid out. And so that when the RFPs are done, that they're done in a way that's fair and equitable to all of us.
Okay. I have one last question from a viewer actually in Bowie. But before that, I do want to say that when I posted that we were going to have your show, some of the bros, your bros, because you are a man, you are a member of Omega Sci-Fi. They're like, oh, I know him and he's a bro. And I'm like, well, what's a bro? So I had to go through that whole, you didn't play a graduate, you really went through it. So you know some good people that I know. So just wanted to let you know
I
that.
appreciate
They're watching.
Okay. Go ahead.
So Barbara Brown from Bowie, a Bowie resident, said that $500,000 plus homes were built on Church Road. A bill came up to build 100 public housing buildings around the airport. She wanted to know what your stance is on that.
Well, one of the things that happens is that, just so you'll know, is it's not in the city of Bowie. So we get to give some say-so on what happens outside of the actual city limits, but the airport is actually outside of the city limits. The other issue we keep fighting for, though, is that we get zoning rights within the city. We haven't been able to do that. We can make recommendations, but the county still makes the final decision on what's being built and what can go on in the city. And I think we need to continue to fight to be able to get that. I don't take away, even though there's $500,000 homes and all that, I think when we talk about affordable housing, in my case, workforce housing, I think we need to make sure it's of a quality, you know, that people don't look at it and say, oh, look at that area or it's blighted. You know, no, we want to make sure that it's something of quality. You know, and yeah, there are people who will do that, who, you know, developers can do what they want pretty much as long as they get the county approval. And yeah, I do believe there are certain places where we need to do. My concern about affordable housing, workforce housing and all is not necessarily who it's built next to, but if it's built in a place that can accommodate the numbers. And what I mean by that is the one of the things I ran on as mayor was to stop the overdevelopment. And everybody said, oh, what are you trying to? Well, the purpose of that is just so we don't want you to put dense development in places where the school is already at 130% capacity. We don't want you to build dense developments where the infrastructure can't handle it, the roads and other things. That's what I talk about, stopping overdevelopment. Putting a lot of housing over by, for example, the airport is a fight we've had, and a dense amount of housing. The real issue becomes whether or not it can handle. We had that young man who was hit and killed on Church Road. So we're worried about more and more traffic there. We're worried about, can we make sure that the school system can handle the kids? I think people read and they say they're in Bowie, and they read about Bowie and it's a great place, and they say, yes, I want to be there. But I also want to make sure that we have the resources for them, that people aren't taken. If I buy a house in Bowie and the expectation is that I'll be able to have a good school, I'll be able to be in an area where, it's safe and all of those things. And if that's not the case, if we build it too dense and we don't have those resources and we don't have the quality education that people need, then I think we've misled people. And we want to make sure that people are put in a place and things are done that really provide the quality throughout all of Prince George's County. We talk about being the wealthiest, majority, minority, community, all of those things. Well, we've got to continue to live up to that. We've got to make it so that the next generation is able to have that generational wealth and be able to live here, but also be able to contribute and have the jobs and all the things that go along with a true lifestyle that we want them to have.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So I'll give you the floor. The last 2 minutes, there's a lot of conversation about there's some betting going on and not having two Black representatives on the Board of Public Works for the state. It's just, I think people are always discouraged, but it would be a big first. So yes. Why should everyone vote for you? I'll give you the floor for the last 2 minutes and just let us know.
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand why I'm running and why I'm doing it is because I truly believe I am the best qualified candidate for comptroller. And what I mean by that, I am the only candidate who has gone through that process of understanding what it is, particularly MBE business and growing a business, and understand the challenges that go with that. But also all the decisions and things that go with running a large organization, not only with a diverse workforce, but with diverse and sites for different offices. I have about 23 different states I'm operating out of. So you have to be able to have that executive leadership on making those hard decisions. What do you really spend on? How do you do to manage those budgets? How do you do all of those things? And I've done all of that. And I talk to people about, and who know, when you're growing your business, when you're developing a business, what happens is, with all the heartache and the ups and downs that go with that, but you end up being wiser and you end up being stronger for that. And so I have that set of tools, that leadership experience, and on the private sector. But I also have that executive leadership on the public service side, being the mayor, and making sure that we're sticking to our budgets, making sure that we're going through budgets, and we're making sure we're making good, solid decisions for the citizens and all. So I'm the only one who has both of those. And I think that's what the comptroller needs. Somebody who understands, particularly contracts. I've been dealing with complex contracts as a DoD contractor for over 30 years. And I know the games that people play. And somebody's got to be there to call them out, to see them coming. You can't wait until it's done, but to see them coming and call them back. But also,
well, if you don't know me, I'm holding this video, and we're gonna call you out.
And that's the other part. And the other part of that is it's about generational wealth. It's about making sure that I've been so fortunate in my life that I want to make sure that I fight for those coming behind me. Like I said a little earlier, you know, I'm standing on the shoulders of all those great people who have come before me, on those giants. Well, I just want to make sure I straighten my back and let those coming behind me stand on my shoulders as well. You know, that's what it's about. And I'll leave you on this, because this is a driving force for me. Whenever, because, you know, all the boards I'm on and being mayor and running my large company and all of that, and then campaigning, it can wear. But as many of you know, my eldest daughter died last year. And she left us with, well, then he was 1 year old. He's a 2-year-old now. I have a 2-year-old grandson. And when I look at him and I look in his eyes, and I look into the eyes of that beautiful little brown baby boy, I want to make sure that I leave this state with an opportunity of where he can reach his full potential, not based on the color of his skin, but just on whatever he can do. I want him to be able to live in a place where, you know, he can be proud of. And then he and all those other little babies, those young people, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, can create an environment and have opportunities that so many have fought for us to have. And that's why I'm doing this. You know, I'm not looking for, as some of my opponents are, for another job. I am not looking to try and become governor. I'm not trying to look to do this or that. I'm looking to create a better place for all of us here in the state of Maryland. And I've been fortunate to have the resources and all the things. And I've had my run doing that. I'm proud of that. But now it's about making sure that we fight for those coming behind us. And we got to give it everything we've got to make sure that we create a better world for them.
Well, you certainly sound very gubernatorial. You sound very gubernatorial. So, Nicole,
everybody, you know, everybody keeps telling me that. Everybody keeps saying, "Why are you not running for?" No, because, and I say,
slim pickings.
Running for a comptroller is where we can make the greatest immediate economic impact for all of us. That's where we can do it, and that's why I want to do it. And again, I am the most qualified to do that.
Wonderful. Well, I'm highly impressed. Thank you for coming out. Can you please tell us where your next fundraiser, if any, will be happening, campaigns, anything?
You know, one of the things that we're doing some different things, and I'll be sharing that right now. To keep up with what's going on, just go to timadams.org. And we'll share that, because one of the things I tell people is, you know, I'm not pushing too much for a lot of fancy fundraisers and all of those things, because we're still in a pandemic. You know, a lot of people don't have the money, the resources to do that. And you know, I appreciate whatever people can do and all of that, but right now I'm more concerned about people being safe. And then those contributions right at the morning with that Omicron. Let's keep each other safe. But we'll be doing things, and we're gonna be rolling. As I say, you know, Maryland, let's roll. And I am so happy I have so many people who just come by, who toot their horn and all say, I'm rolling with Tim. So I'm excited about that. And thank you so much for allowing me to be with you this evening.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And we'll hopefully have you back on as your campaign, as the election gets closer. We'd love to have you back on to check in with you.
Yeah. And I would love just the opportunity, even if not election related, just to talk to you about business and talk to you about what we can do, how we can make sure that we help each other.
Absolutely.
Because that's the key.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Thank
because
you.
a strong business network of people like ourselves, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's Tim Adams, candidate for I'm saying Baltimore City, the Comptroller of Maryland, the state of Maryland, who is the current mayor of Bowie. Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget to check out Nicole and Michael Haney this Sunday at 6 p.m. for the 90 Minutes in Black News. Okay. Take care. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Hey, have a good night. And thank you again.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.